Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Leap. I appreciate you all tuning in week to week and always start with the intention that I hope our conversation today will help you wherever you are in your own journey or in supporting someone in your life that may be experiencing grief and loss. I have a special guest with me today who has had some very deep losses in her life and very recent loss of her grandchild. I'd like to introduce Audree Thurman today. Thank you, Audree, for being here. Just going to read a little bit about who you are to introduce you, and then we'll jump right into your story. Audree has 43 plus years experience as a technologist, and she was a founder of Sibs Forever website. I think it's sibsforever.org, and it's a nonprofit company. Prior to that, she was an individual contributor to roles that included developer, an architect, computer science faculty. She has been in leadership roles, which has included a CISO, a vice president of engineering, and founder and CEO. And currently, Audree has dedicated this part of her journey really focusing on purposeful work and living a balanced life. Audree has lost both a sibling and a grandchild, and I want to welcome you to our show today, Audree.
Thank you, Susan. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Let's start with your story. So why don't you go ahead and take us back in time?
We're going to go all the way back into the 1960s.
Yes.
Where my childhood, which before 1967 was fairly normal, but veered kind of out of control when my 14-year-old sister, Robin, unexpectedly died. I was 12 years old at that time. So I'm 67 now, so that was a long time ago, more than 50 years ago. My family was quite dysfunctional. Neither one of my parents were really set up and balanced to be able to have children that maybe were a little bit different. And Robin was somewhere on the autism spectrum. Of course, the story predates everything that we now know and understand about autism, but she was socially and physically kind of awkward, struggled in school, and they really did not understand her or understand how to properly parent her. She was a very brilliant musician, however. She played the piano just wonderfully, had perfect pitch, and just really had a noticeable and exciting talent in music. It was a very difficult childhood for Robin because my parents basically pressured her to be someone that she could not be. They wanted her to be socially adept, and she just was awkward. So they couldn't hide that, and it was very difficult. Whereas me, I was kind of a younger child, and things came pretty easily. I didn't have the same issues or the same talents as Robin. So, but my recollection of life before Robin died when I was 12, was that it was pretty easy, pretty simple. She died very unexpectedly. I was in a play that night in November of 1967, and I left for the play. She was sick, had sort of what we thought was a normal childhood illness. I left for the play and said goodbye. And when I came back from the performance, she was dead. And there was a house full of people. It was kind of a surreal night. I came back, people were meandering around the house, talking about Robin, talking about me, almost like we weren't there. My mother announced to this large room full of people that she was going to conceive another child, which was kind of news to everybody, including my father. And it was really like just surreal, like a dream almost.
I want to pause you there for a moment because I think that I had some time to talk to Audree prior to the episode being recorded. And I think I really want listeners to understand just how profound and traumatic this would have been, because I really sat with this too, Audree, after you and I talked initially, that literally you left, you came home, your sister died, and that was it. There was no more conversation about it. There was no grieving about it. Your mother decided she was going to have another child, and that was it. It's so profound.
Pretty much. I mean, I left, as I said, she wasn't feeling well, but it was nothing. Kids get sick, and it wasn't really anything that anybody expressed any concern over. I certainly didn't have any. I mean, and when I came back, right, she was dead. It was a room full of people. My mother announced she was going to conceive another child. 5 months later, she was pregnant. And They dealt with the grief in very unhealthy ways. Each of them, my mother and my father, had a lot of guilt, especially my father, who really didn't like Robin very much and didn't get along well with her. Again, I emphasize that they didn't understand her because she was special. So they did have a lot of guilt, but they really kind of focused on this new child. And 14 months after her death, my brother was born. And then, her room was turned into a nursery.
And what was, do you remember at 12 years old? Do you remember those feelings, or like, were you confused? What was it like for you at 12 years old? And I know that you said you were very excited about your brother, right? Because now it was sort of taking that spotlight off you, now that there was this massive hole that your sister had died. I just would love to take a moment just to honor that 12-year-old child and what was happening for you at that time.
Well, I had a lot of guilt, Susan. I wasn't the nicest of sisters. I think we were sort of set up to be competitive. We weren't really encouraged to be loving. And I don't really have a lot of loving memories. I have a few, but certainly not really that many. So I had a lot of guilt about the way I treated her myself. I obviously, through the years, realized that had we become adults together, all that would have been resolved. But we didn't get that chance. And I didn't get a chance to tell her because I didn't know how I really felt. So I had my own guilt. So I was very closed, very bottled up inside, and I was kind of abandoned, right? They were off doing this child thing. I was left with all this guilt. And all of a sudden, as an only child, I said I was a younger child, kind of freewheeling. And then all of a sudden, I had this big spotlight on me. Everything I was doing was heavily observed and commented on and scrutinized. And I had all this guilt. So I really froze. I would say I was emotionally frozen. I became a driven perfectionist. I went from being sort of freewheeling before into this driven perfectionist where nothing could be anything but perfect.
And this is through your adolescent years, right? Like all
through my life, even today. So yeah, I think once you become perfectionist, you don't shed it. So I do see my life as, kind of before Robin, where I wasn't this way. And then after Robin, where I've continued, obviously I've done a lot of work and have become healthier in many ways, but I'm still quite driven and have been through my whole adult life. So I changed. I became a different person, frozen. But after my brother was born, it did get better. I was delighted to welcome him into the world. I mean, I loved having him, and the spotlight was shared. And I was happy for some of the spotlight to be off of me. That was good for me. It didn't really help me move forward. It didn't help me heal. It didn't help me resolve my guilt, but at least I had a little less pressure. And for that, I was grateful.
And when did you, Audree, was there a time throughout your life? I know you've had this very rich professional life, you had children. Did you ever seek therapy? Like, was there a moment in time when you're like, you know what? I have this unresolved grief? Because I think, especially in childhood, we can have things come up for us in adulthood, but we don't connect it to earlier trauma. Talk to us about what your journey looked like.
So, yeah, there has to be a point where you basically, for me, I couldn't remain forever. So I went away. I couldn't wait to get away, Susan. I couldn't move far enough away from my parents quick enough. And so I did move away, but I wasn't prepared, right? So I moved away for college at 17 with the emotional maturity of a 12-year-old. So unsurprisingly, it was a disaster. It was terrible. I didn't have any self-esteem. I had no idea how to take care of myself. And so I ended up becoming sick. I got pneumonia. I dropped out of school. I ended up having a series of very codependent relationships. I didn't know who I was. So I was who anybody wanted me to be. I didn't love myself. I felt unlovable. So anybody that did love me, I just sort of grasped onto. And so I did hit rock bottom. I became pregnant unexpectedly. And at that point, I realized that if I continued on this way, that I was going to have a terrible outcome. And so I did, at that point, go back to school and start therapy through student services. And that was a big turning point for me. When I went back to school, I was very driven and I really worked hard. I always knew it was related to Robin. That wasn't a surprise. I didn't know what the word unresolved guilt meant or anything like that, but I realized that my lack of self-esteem and my feelings of unlovability, which I knew, I understood what those were, resulted directly from all the guilt that had been built up over all these years over losing my sister. So I wanted to get better. I mean, I reached a really bad point, right? I mean, it was a terrible moment, and I was on bad terms with my parents, and I didn't like myself. And so, yeah, I went back to school and started therapy. And I've been intermittently in therapy ever since. I'm in therapy now. I resumed after my grandson died, after being in and out over basically my whole life. But that was a triggering moment that put me back in there.
Let's move into that because one of the questions I wanted to ask you, and I've thought about since you and I had an opportunity to chat, because it's a little uncanny, right? That now here you are, you created this website where other siblings could go and really have a space for their memories. It's so beautiful. We will have this also in the show notes, the link to sibsforever.org. It's such a beautiful website. But then your grandson got sick. So let's talk about that for this. When did you come up with the Sibs Forever org? When did you?
So I was starting to think about it. And so my grandson's name is Hayden.
Hayden, yes.
So let me just bridge the story. So I had
Yes.
I got married, a marriage that didn't last. I wasn't in the best position to choose a life partner, but it was a good partner, somebody that gave me a lot of space, and I needed a lot of space. We had 2 children. I desperately wanted a family, right? I mean, I had this very dysfunctional family, this broken family. So I had very definite ideas of what the kind of parents would be that I wanted to be. That would have been a good mother, a good set of parents for Robin. That's what I wanted to be. I wanted to be that that person, that mother that Robin should have had. So I got married. I had 2 children fairly quickly. I had a daughter, and I named her after Robin, which I always knew I would do. Her name is Bree Robin. I knew instantly that was something I wanted to do. And then 2 years later, a son, Tyler. So Bree Robin she got married. She grew up, and I kind of was that mother that I wanted to be. I'm very, very close with both of my children. She got married and had twin children, Brenna and Hayden, and they were born in 2009. And she moved very close to me. I helped take care of these kids so that she could go back to work. So I kind of helped her raise them, and it was just a delight in every way. So when Hayden was both of them were about 10, when they were very young, I saw them all the time. She dropped them off. She was working, as they went further in school, they had extracurricular activities. I didn't see them quite as frequently, but I still saw them quite a bit. And at 10, Hayden started exhibiting some symptoms. He was a little bit tired. Bree said he had kind of this shiver on his, I'd say his shoulder and his upper body. And I started noticing little things. I didn't really take it seriously because I really believed, as illogical as this is for a logical person like me, I really believe that I had already experienced this terrible tragedy, and therefore I was immune from anything else, and therefore nothing bad could really happen. And even though that makes no sense, I had internalized it my whole life, and so I believed it from top to bottom. And so I never really considered that anything could really seriously be wrong with him. And then his eyes started moving weirdly, like he was cross-eyed, like he had a lazy eye. And so Bree took him to an ophthalmologist who looked inside his eyes and then sent him over to the Children's Hospital for an MRI of his brain. And he had a massive brain tumor that had basically covered half of his brain, but it was the kind that was dispersed. So there was the cancer cells mixed in with the healthier cells. And so it wasn't like a surgical thing. You couldn't just take it out because it wasn't a solid tumor. So it was a stage 4 astrocytoma, which is the worst of the worst. So it was basically fatal upon
and
diagnosis.
Very quickly, right?
11 months later, he was dead. Yeah.
I'm gonna cry. I just want to pause just to say how sorry I am. It is so tragic. And I know that and just the sheer, I don't want to call it irony because I do believe that, we all have our soul path, but that here you lost your sister as a child. And now you are supporting your daughter and your granddaughter, right?
So it's very difficult. I mean, I watched my mother lose a child. She obviously was very unhealthy and very dysfunctional. Then I had to watch my daughter lose a child. She was much healthier, but it's the worst possible thing. I knew upon diagnosis that it was fatal, but she didn't know that. She couldn't know that. I mean, she had to at least hope. Right. And so we tried everything. We put him into a clinical trial, which is really the only thing you could do when there's no standard of care, which there certainly wasn't in this case. We did everything that we could, even though, I mean, I knew, but you still hold out hope.
Of course.
You still try. It's a difficult balance. Your daughter has to find her way with this. You can't find it for her as much as you want to.
But Audree, what was going on for you? Because this had to have brought up, I mean, it had to have catapulted you back into the past.
Oh, yeah.
Plus
Very triggering.
The triggers that were going on for you. And here you are trying to hold it together for your daughter. But I want to put a pause button on that for a moment, because you said something where you were in this belief that, hey, I've already paid my dues to the universe or to God or to whatever language you use, because I felt the same way when my brother died. I'm like, Kay, that's it. I got my dose of tragedy. Now everyone else in my life is safe. And so I understand that psychology. And I think all of us who have had it deep, premature losses, like I like to call it, but of course that's ridiculous, right? Because we know people die every day and at all sorts of different ages, but still in our own mind, when we lose somebody, we think that is not supposed to happen to us. But how did you navigate this incredible loss? First, it's your grandson. Okay, so there's that. Then you're trying to support your daughter, and it's triggering you from when you were a child, and you've got your granddaughter, Brenna. I mean, how did you, do you know what I'm trying to ask? Yeah. I don't even have the words.
So, but basically what happened, it was very triggering for me, but I put that aside until after he passed, because what I wanted to do is I wanted to focus all of my attention, and I have a lot of inner strength, right? And I'm very tenacious and very energetic. I wanted all of my energies to go toward my daughter, Bree, and the grandchildren. First of all, there was Hayden, who had he never saw a child die. He didn't even know children could die, right? He basically said, I'm a kid, I'm going to get better. And so I had to spend time with him so that he could at least embrace the idea that maybe kids don't always get better. So I started reading out loud to him, but I decided to do because, Bree wasn't in a position really to do it. I decided I would read books to him, books about kids that had challenges, kids with cancer, or kids that had other personal challenges, and how they dealt with it. So we started with this one book. It was called The Honest Truth. It was a very sweet story about a boy who had cancer and just was fed up with the whole thing, took his dog and went to Mount Rainier. He always wanted to climb it and had this great adventure. Eventually, he ended up passing away, but that really wasn't part of the book. It was based on a true story. And, but just showed his courage and his love and how that manifested and how that really made such a difference in how he dealt with his life situation. So I started out with that book. And that kind of opened Hayden's eyes to the fact that kids live with cancer and it's not always getting better. And then we went into other books with similar kinds of themes of challenges that kids dealt with in different ways. And so I started this whole reading thing. So first it was just with Hayden, and then Brenna got involved, and I had a book for Brenna and a book for Hayden, and then a book that we were reading together. And even when we lived in New York for a little while, Bree and Hayden and myself, as part of the clinical trial at Sloan, I would use the Kindle, and over Zoom, I would be reading to him, reading to Brenna and reading to him. He was right there, but reading to Brenna over Zoom. So I kept the online, the reading out loud through the whole 11 months. And it was a big part of his life. He really looked forward to that. I did it every day. And over time, I think he basically embraced the fact that he was just he was going to go with it. He never really, looked depressed. He never seemed really anxious. He trusted the adults around him to make the right decisions and work hard on his
behalf. I can't remember, was his dad in the picture?
Yeah, his dad's in the picture, but his dad was in the same shape as Bree. Right. They were in such distress themselves.
Right, of course.
So I'd say that I was a pretty major force in both in everybody's life at that time. And that's what I wanted to be. So I put my own issues kind of aside. And then after he passed away, they came roaring in, and I kind of fell apart at that time. And so that's what we did. And, I wanted to prepare Brenna. I talked a lot about what it was like for me to be a surviving sibling. I wanted her to have a different experience than what I had.
Did Brenna and Hayden know at the end that he was going to pass? Were they aware?
Both of them were aware. For the last, I'd say, maybe 8 weeks, there was a period of time at the very end where Hayden was not able to communicate, but before then, maybe for the last few months, he had weekly one-on-ones over Zoom with the rabbi, and they talked also. So he was really kind of involved. He loved all the Judaism aspects. I made matzo ball soup. He loved all that. So it wasn't just me. So we introduced him to sort of a regular weekly session with the rabbi, and the rabbi was clear that he knew.
Wow. So can we move into then, the feelings that are coming up for me as I'm even listening to you is just, it almost feels like a tsunami of just a wave, like of the multiple things that were happening simultaneously for you. And I just feel like this overwhelming sense of almost like melting into a puddle after your grandson, after Hayden died. Because you're still having to be the rock. You're having to be the rock for your daughter, and you're having to be the rock for Brenna, and I'm probably your son. And what was your son-in-law's name?
David.
David. Yeah. And so, Audree, what were you doing? What did your self-care look like? Because I'm sure you were holding it all together in that pillar for everyone. And then
when he passed, then I realized that it was unbelievably triggering. I mean, I did everything that I could to prepare Brenna and to be there for Bree and to be there for Hayden. I couldn't have done any more, really. I spent 100% in wearing that, doing with that role. That's all I really cared about. But it all changed when he passed. So, I became just very emotional. I felt very guilty, just like I did for Robin. That I didn't recognize the initial symptoms. He had those subtle symptoms like the chill in the eyes, because I had this this notion of nothing bad can happen. I felt very guilty about that. That could I have recognized it sooner? Would that have even mattered? So, I knew I needed to resume therapy myself. So I did. I got a recommendation. I've since changed to a different therapist, but I've been in therapy ever since. And, it's been 2.5 years since he passed in 2020. So I started focusing more on myself and then focusing on the nonprofit. So I kind of decided during Hayden's last couple of weeks that I would step away from my consulting business and start a nonprofit. I had lots of ideas of things I could do to honor him and to honor Brenna. I had ideas of doing something with the reading out loud that was so wonderful and cathartic and healthy for everybody. And then, I had the sibling thing. Brenna was going to be a surviving sibling. I'm a surviving sibling. So I had a lot of ideas. I bought domain names for all those ideas. And then I just kind of settled on, Sibs Forever, that, it's going to be memories for her, right? She's got lots of pictures, lots of videos, lots of stories, and she needs to hold on to those things. I have tons of things from Robin. I have so many artifacts I've carried from house to house over all these years. Pictures. I have music. I have her old music, piano music that she played in the early 60s with the teacher's notes written on them. I mean, I've just taken everything, and wouldn't it be really beautiful for me to memorialize that relationship somehow, use my talents, my technical talents, to be able to memorialize that relationship and provide a safe, private, secure environment for other people to do the same thing. So that's when I decided to go ahead with Sibs Forever. I decided before Hayden passed, but I didn't really actually talk to Bree or to Brenna about it until afterwards.
So first of all, before we jump into how they felt about that, I still want to go back to, I don't want to gloss over this incredible time in your life where all of these triggers were happening and you went to therapy. Audree, what's been most helpful for you in this period of time? I know people get triggered by the word healing or all of those different things, because I really just do think that we learn to integrate the loss of the people we love into our lives. I feel like my brother, I think I told you when we talked, my brother's with me all the time. I talk, like, he's very much in my life, even though sometimes I swear I can see him smiling in the corner, but I still miss him all the time. And it's been 9 years. I miss that physical presence. And so what has been the most helpful to you as you integrate these losses into your life? I mean, and certainly, of course, your grandson, Hayden.
So I think, what I've learned, through therapy is, I think the main thing is that I have a chance to be the person that I wanted to be the kind of mother to Bree and David that I want to be, the grandmother to Brenna, still the sister to Robin, to live the life that I want to live, and to be able to do that. I have really good feelings about Robin and Hayden being together. I saw a medium shortly after, well, it was about a year after Hayden died, who painted this picture of them growing up together that really, resonated with me and stayed in my mind. And, very kind of really nice picture. My therapist has had me write letters to them, various other kind of diary journal sorts of entries where I was been able to express kind of the image I have of them and the relationship that I continue to have with them, because people die, but your relationship doesn't die. Your relationship moves on. It continues. And so I wanted to continue to have that. And Sips Forever has, in a large degree allowed me to have that. One thing, as I said, Robin was a very talented musician. And I'm not nearly as talented, but music has always been a huge part of my life. And I've kept that because that's a bond that I have with her, right? I've taken piano lessons almost my whole life, and I've played other instruments and kept that alive in me because that's something that we shared. So, the relationship is still there. I mean, it still impacts who I am and what I do. And so I value that. And so I do prioritize that. So therapy has helped me, I think, just keep a balance. Certainly, it's helped me deal with my anger. I had a lot of anger, especially toward my parents.
Yeah.
They were, as I said, maybe I had more understanding maybe of why they were the way they were. So that's helped me accept them and their limitations and some of the things that they did that, I have been very, very damaging. And it's taken it's taken a lifetime to get over the anger. They both are dead, and my father died in 1994, but it took many years after that for me to really peel away all the layers of anger that I had. So therapy has helped a lot with that. And then, helped me deal with the guilt that I had, both for Robin, treating her not as lovingly as I would have liked, with Hayden maybe being a little not quite as observant as I wish I had been, and forgiving myself for being human and not continuing to feel guilty. So it's been very beneficial. And then all the writing that I've done and continuing the relationships that I have with both of them. So it's been very beneficial. And I feel like I'm in as good a place as I can be.
Which is remarkable. And I want to say a couple of things, because two very tangible things you just talked about. And my listeners know I wrote my dissertation on writing through the healing benefits of grief, loss, and trauma before I lost my brother. And then, of course, I went on to write a book, and I had to test my own theory. And everyone will, and I'm going to be launching a course, a grief and loss course where people are writing their way through it, because writing, there is a lot of research behind it, and the healing benefits of being able to write your thoughts down. It helps us to process and get it out of our head. I sort of think about it as a hamster wheel, right? If we don't get thoughts out of our head, it's like they can take over. Our thoughts can take over. So I love that you mentioned the writing piece, because I think the writing aspect that's why, they say journaling is healthy anyway, whether or not it's grief or just processing your thoughts. So the journaling has been helpful. I'm on, your site. I've been on your Sips Forever website, and it's so beautiful. And and even though this is memories, it just makes me smile because I'm seeing all of these sweet little faces, and I can imagine just the joy, because I tell people you can hold joy and grief at the same time, right? Because the joy, we only grieve because we can love so deeply. And so when the memories, even though memories might make us cry, eventually they will also be able to make us smile again. And I feel like that's what I can feel, the joy on your website, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And that also has to be very therapeutic to be able to create this site of joyful memories of both it's for other people I know, but just both for you and your grandson. And then, of course, your granddaughter, Brenna, is going to be able to have this for the rest of her life too, right? Where she can, as she gets older, it is going to be, I just feel like it's this treasure chest of memories that you are kind of her keepsake for her.
Yeah, and she's already started. She's uploaded. Yeah. She has lots of pictures and videos. Back in the 60s, I had to take pictures of my pictures to upload. It's a little bit different. She was just able to click, and so it's been good for her, but it will continue to be good. I mean, she will be able to take advantage of the journaling aspect of it a lot more as she gets older and becomes, I think, a little bit more in touch with her feelings.
So what has it like the work that you did, and I asked you this question too before we started, all the work that you did around your sister, letting go of that because guilt and anger are so debilitating. Some people have those feelings, some people don't. I know I wrote about my own guilt and anger that can be very debilitating during grieving and how important it is to be able to process those. And as you said, learn how to forgive our humanness. But how did all of that work help and prepare you for this other massive loss in your life and also in supporting your daughter and Brenna? Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, so as I said, I when I went back to college, I had a lot of pretty intense therapy to get to a place where I was able to really be productive and move forward. But it's taken my whole life to really. I wasn't better. I mean, you never really get better. I mean, I was still angry every time I thought maybe I wasn't angry. I was still angry. I was just maybe a little less angry. So it's a long process. But what I knew was what it meant to be healthy versus the way I was. So I really wanted to create an environment where Brenna didn't have all the same issues that I had, that they were going to be able to talk about Hayden, not wipe him away like what Robin was. Robin was basically gone when my brother was born. That they would continue to honor Hayden, continue to keep his memory alive, that Brenna would be able to be healthy in that way, and that Bree would be able to be healthy in that way. She knew my mother, so she was very clear that she wasn't going to be like that. So yeah, so all the work and everything I learned, I really tried hard to channel that in their direction. You can't make things better for people, but you can create an environment where they can be healthier and you can talk about things. And I did. I talked about it with Bree, who already was aware of my mother's issues, having her own relationship with her, and Brenna. So that's really what I try to do. I really try to focus that they would need to go through their own healing and their own way and in their own time, which they understand completely. And they have a lot more work to do, but they've at least started. And for them to be able to lean on me. I have been the rock and I continue to be the rock. And I want them to have that. I want them to feel like that they can come to me with anything, and that I'm open-minded and totally non-judgmental, and I'll do what I can to help and to offer suggestions.
And that's what I really feel from you is I used the word pillar before because that's sort of what I feel from you. And I think that all of the work that you did helped to create that. It's almost like you've got this strength to hold the space of this incredible grief of your daughter and your granddaughter and your son-in-law. And could you have done that had you not gone through all the things that you've gone through?
No, because I wouldn't have known.
Right. I remember after my brother died, all of the things I had done in my life, and I had always been so taken with the afterlife. In grad school, I read so many books. Who knows why? I was just drawn to that. And I just felt like all of these things, nothing could prepare me for that kind of a loss, but I had something to hang on to when he died so that I didn't completely blow apart. And that's sort of how I feel with you when I think about you. I thought, wow, all of these things led to this day and time of you being able to hold this incredible space for these people in your life so that somebody was not falling apart. I don't know how else to say it, right? That somebody was sort of that solid and will continue to be, I imagine.
I continue to play that role. But it was true that they turned to me as being kind of, I'll use the word rock again. I mean, that I was going to be solid, forthcoming, logical, not totally emotional. And they continue to do it.
When did Hayden die? When did he die?
So he died in August of 2020.
Yeah. So it's still.
Yeah. So short. He had turned 11 the last day of July. So just a couple weeks past 11th birthday.
So it is still so new, so fresh. Your daughter, your son, did they go to grief? What have they done to help them on their own
So they did. This was during, he was sick during the pandemic
Yeah, I was
time.
just going to say, and to make it even worse, it was
Yeah.
during the pandemic. Yeah. God.
So we were in New York during the pandemic, the worst place to be, right? But there we were. We made it work. We had to. So a lot of the grief stuff that they did was on Zoom because
Yes.
it was pandemic, and it's never quite as good. Although, now they are meeting in person. So I'd say so. They went to family grief, and I think they each had some individual therapy. They need more. I don't think they've continued. Bree had this idea when she went to the family grief. There was other families there, but all with children that had passed away. So they were similar in that way, but they weren't similar in the way that the children had died. There was a lot of suicide and drug overdoses. I think he was the only one that had died of cancer, and she felt that it was different.
Yes.
She did. She felt that her grief was different than their grief. She didn't judge, but she didn't feel connected.
Yeah.
And over Zoom, probably not the best way to connect with people anyway. So she did do it for many months, and then she stopped. And I'm sure she will resume when she feels that she is ready to resume.
Yeah, I ran grief and loss groups at the Center for Grieving Children for a long time, 5 years. And interesting when we think about how we lose our loved ones, because I do think, and people who have lost people to suicide will tell you the same thing, that because then that's a whole bag of guilt and anger. And I do think that there is a lot of truth to that. The way in which we lose people, what those relationships look like. We say that grief is very universal, but I do think that there is a reason also that you try to pull people together that have a shared experience, because I do think that there are differences in the way that we are able to process our grief based on, like I said, what that relationship looked like and how that person died in our life.
And I think that's what she said. She couldn't relate to that kind of guilt and anger. And there wasn't anybody else there. There's not that many kids that die this way. So it wasn't, it's more, it's time, right? These are people that had losses around the same time. So, they're thrown together based on that time frame.
Were you able to be, this is totally a side note, but this was during COVID. Were you allowed to be in the hospital with Hayden?
So Hayden died at home. So he did die at hospital, but he spent some time in Sloan as part of his clinical trial, and he did have a brain surgery, but the kid, he kind of was out the next day. It was fine.
Okay. So he didn't really spend a lot of time in the hospital.
No, because there was nothing, good. There was no hospital-based treatment.
Things
really
that they could do, right? Because he didn't do, right. Got it. So sort of to bring this full circle, where are you now in your own healing journey around the loss of your grandson Hayden? Where are you?
So I'm focused, on as I said, on purposeful living. There's a second project that SIPS Forever has taken on. When I finished the flagship project that, sipsforever.org, and tried to connect it up with other grief and loss organizations, I found that there was a need, since there was a lot of resource pages, but they were all stale and not really topical. So, some of them hadn't been touched in 10 years. Some domains were no longer even dealing with grief and loss. So I decided that the next project that SIPS Forever would do would be something that handled that would be kind of like a Yelp for online resources, where they would be very topical, so somebody could ask for help and we'd deliver a pinpointed set of resources and then allow people to review them. So, it'll use some AI, so to be able to do some natural language processing to do that kind of a match. So I've been focused on that. It's a really big project.
It sounds huge, so it's exciting as well. So where are you with that? Where are you with that project? Can you kind of?
So I've been very involved in kind of learning a lot about especially these, all this new stuff in large language models. It's very exciting. I have applied for a grant, so hopefully if I get some money, then I'll be able to get some people to help, and that will really help move the pace of it. So I have pieces of it working, and I have designs for the rest of it. So it's been really interesting. And I've tried to really branch out and connect to as many different people and organizations to get to basically have a presence so that people know what I'm doing and how it will benefit them. And so I'm going to be showing up and, running some workshops, and so, I've did some other podcasting. So I'm trying to get my story and my nonprofit to be more well known, so that when we do deliver our first version of this, it'll be something that people understand where it fits. And I really think it'll take off like wildfire because everybody needs this. People say, well, there's no resources for siblings. Well, that's not true. You just can't find them, right?
Yes,
so
exactly.
if you could find them, wouldn't that be great? And so, we are working on solving that problem. I'm a techie, so that's a really good place for me to put my talents. And
are you looking for any volunteers?
Well, I will be as soon as we get a little bit further. I definitely will be looking for volunteers, and I do need other people to participate because it's too big for one person to do. I was able to do sibsforever.org, but I had to work full time for 2 years on it. So this is even bigger than that.
Well, good, because before we go into your links and where people can find you, you know that I always end with a couple of questions. And I think from my experience that the idea of self-love changes after we have a traumatic loss or a traumatic experience in our life. How do you think about self-love now? What does that look like for you?
Well, I spent so many years not having any self-love,
Right.
feeling unlovable. So, and it's a very big and important thing. I mean, when you don't love yourself, then, you basically open yourself up for really abuse of all kinds because you don't know who you are. So for me,
and you don't think you're worthy of anything.
Yeah.
Right.
You don't think you're worthy. And so whatever anybody says, you just accept because you don't feel any differently. Right. So it's pretty horrible to be in that shape. And I was in that shape for many years. So to feel like you're worthy and to feel like you're lovable is huge. So for me, I really hang on to it. I mean, I value it that I am lovable and I'm doing exactly what I want to be doing. I'm focused on what I believe are my passions, using my talents. And, as a person, I'm going to be there for people. The one thing I've learned is that, when you love yourself, then you can present yourself for other people. Like you can be there, you can show up for people because you know who you are and you know what you could do to support people. So I really do like prioritize those things, but it's taken me all this, I'm 67. It's taken me my whole life to get there.
Yeah, well, at least you got there. Right. And I love what you said. It's true. Very, very true. I mean, the idea of filling our well with love, then that's what we have to give. We only can give what we have to give. If we are an empty well, there is nothing there to give. So I love that.
And I know the difference, right?
Yes.
I can see what I'm able to do now that I couldn't have done before.
Finish this sentence for me. Hope is.
So hope is having this dream, knowing where you fit in that dream and moving toward it. That's just being hopeful.
I love that. I just wrote that down.
I kind of know who I want to be and who I could be. And I am always on a kind of a path to get there. And I get closer all the time.
That's the co-creation, right? The co-creation with the universe. I just love the way you put that, though. It's actually one of the most beautiful ways people have answered that question. I think I'm actually gonna type it out and blow it up. I love that, Audree. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
That is a beautiful way to end. Okay, Audree, where can people find you? What are your channels?
So, I mean, Sibs Forever. I have sibsforever.net, .com, and .org will all get you to places where you can get to the others.
Okay.
So the nonprofit website is sibsforever.net. The flagship application where you get to go online and create a space to honor your relationship with your sibling is sibsforever.org. And the online resources search engine that I talked about is onlineresources.org. So right now it does have a page. It's kind of telling you that it's coming. And you could always just search for Audree Thurman. It's my professional name. So lots of things will come up, and all those things will also get you into other places where I've done some writing out on Medium and get you to those places as well.
Okay, wonderful. Is there anything else you want to say to listeners before we say goodbye?
So I think, my main message needs to be that you could suffer these huge tragedies like I have and have a lot of grief and loss, but you can still find your way forward, work through therapy and, through your own strength and your own relationships to find your way forward and to be able to live a joyful and purposeful life. I mean, I wake up in the morning with a big smile on my face. I approach the day doing purposeful work and having good relationships with my family and my close friends, and it's possible. So I leave that as the message, that it is possible. And any time that you can have a tragedy and then find purpose later is a gift for everybody.
Thank you for that. I love mediums too, and I went to a reader very recently who's she's wonderful, and people have heard me that talk about her in the past, Marianne, but that my brother continues to do his work through the work I'm doing, and I always feel that, he's the one who put me on this road, so he left, and now I'm doing something with that tragedy, but it feels like we're co-contributors, right? And I'm sure you must feel that way
Oh
too.
yeah,
Like they're
I
just
do feel that way.
they're part of it. It's like, okay, what do you want me to do today? I want to
Definitely.
thank you so much, because what could have been such a sad conversation, and that's why I always find myself smiling during these very sad conversations, because it is the transformation that comes out of and is born out of deep loss if we allow that darkness to transform or transmute. And I just want to thank you for sharing your story. And I want to thank your sister Robin and Hayden, because I know that they're with us too. And yeah, I think that what you're doing is beautiful and important. And I want to thank you for that. I want to thank all my listeners and hope that you guys are going to take a little nugget from today's conversation with you on your own journey. So thank you guys. I love you all. We'll see you here next week, and bye for now.